Welcome to this module, which describes safe working practices that should be adopted when handling and processing the cat. Specifically, these practices should be adopted when cod ends are being hauled on board and the catch is released in the sorting tray or brine tank, when the cod ends are being retied, when the catch is being sorted and processed, and when the catch is being refrigerated and/or frozen. When the catch is being hauled on board, there are several safety risks that must be considered. One is to ensure that you are not standing in a loop or bight of rope attached to the grapple. The grapple is thrown to hook the lazy line or marriage line and bring the cod end on board, and a bight of rope around the foot may be pulled tight and cause injury. Of course, you must also take care not to fall overboard, particularly when hauling the grapple by hand, and when the weather is rough. The next is to ensure the sister clips are used correctly to attach the lazy line to the lazy line winch. Sometimes these clips can separate if they have not been connected correctly. If this occurs under load, the recoiling lazy line could cause significant injury. It is also important not to stand under the hauling block in case the shackle or chain connecting the block to the rigging gives way. As the lazy line hauls the cod end to the boat, it will be under significant tension. It is also important to observe the lazy line as it is hauled, particularly on a rolling vessel. Normally the lazy line is controlled by lazy line guides, but in heavy weather they may become uncontrolled and potentially strike and injure crew on the back deck. As the cod end is hauled on board, it is important to stand well clear to avoid being crushed between cod end and sorting tray. The cod end may also swing violently as it is being maneuvered over the sorting tray. During this process, care is also required to ensure that poisonous animals or those with spines, sharp teeth, or claws do not fall on you from the netting overhead. Finally, as the catch is spilled on the sorting tray, there is a possibility of encountering these animals, and a close lookout is required to avoid contact and subsequent poisoning or injury. If the trawl is to be immediately deployed again, the cod end will need to be lowered onto the deck so the drawstrings can be tied. Care is required to avoid contact with hazardous animals that may be entangled or meshed in cod end meshes. In heavy weather, the cod end may move suddenly about the deck as the boat moves with the sea. Standing on the cod end to keep it still should be avoided, as it may suddenly be pulled from under your feet. As you throw the cod end overboard, make sure the drawstrings are not entangled around your legs. In heavy weather, the lazy line may suddenly become slack and then taut as the boat passes over a wave. In this instance, there is a risk of being struck by the lazy line or worse, entangled and pulled overboard. As the catch passes along the conveyor belt to be sorted, care is required to avoid contact with poisonous animals or those with spines, sharp teeth, or claws. PPE in the form of rubber boots, gloves, and an apron will reduce the risk of injury. It is also important to be aware of animals heading your way along the conveyor belt, and not just those in front of you. A description of hazardous animals and appropriate first aid is described in the Hazardous Animals module. Finally, it is important to be aware that the conveyor belt may snag loose clothing and long hair. Prior to packaging, the prawns are dipped in a water solution that also contains an agent to prevent black spot. The most common agent is sodium metabisulfite, a hazardous substance commonly known as meta. Meta should be handled in an open, well-ventilated area, taking care to avoid breathing in the fumes because it can cause breathing difficulties. Asthmatics should take particular care when handling meta. The best option is to open the bag of meta underwater. The meta should then be dissolved in the water and the bag disposed of appropriately. That does not mean throwing it overboard. Meta can also cause rashes on the arms. It is advisable to read the chemical safety data sheet for the handling and storage of meta. This sheet will be available on board to read. When large catches are landed, there is sometimes a need to refrigerate the catch in brine tanks. It is vital that several safety steps are taken when the brine tank lid is being raised or is in the raised position. Brine tank lids are heavy and cause serious crush injuries or death if they are dropped on a crew member. The safety steps are: ensure the lifting gear, such as shackle, rope, and lifting hooks are in good condition and serviceable. Ensure no one is standing near the brine tank lid, or in the brine tank, when the lid is being raised or lowered, and ensure that a second, independent lifting rope is attached to the lid whilst in the upright position, to provide extra security. Finally, if the winch operator cannot see the entire lifting or lowering operation, they must designate an experienced individual to provide instruction, using appropriate signals. See the winch safety module for details of these signals. When working in a freezer, either to place cartons or prawns in the snap or to empty the snap and stow the cartons, or just to pick up frozen food for cooking, a number of safety steps must be taken. The first is to wear appropriate PPE to avoid freezer burn or frostbite, including a freezer suit, boots, gloves, and headwear such as a beanie. Care is also necessary to avoid crush injuries from cartons of frozen prawns moving in the hold, and to avoid slips, trips, and falls when walking over an icy surface, particularly on a rolling boat. Extra precaution against head injury is also required when reaching upwards to receive cartons of prawns from the deck or to hand up frozen food for cooking. Either of these dropped on the head can cause serious injury. These precautions also apply when unloading the catch at the end of a fishing trip. As a final note, a freezer or hold is considered a confined space, meaning that toxic gases could be present. As such, appropriate safety precautions should be taken, as described in the Confined Spaces module. This means you should never enter the freezer alone, or without someone keeping an eye out, and if a crew member collapses in the freezer, do not enter that space until Confined Spaces safety protocols have been applied. Do not become the next victim. Excellent! You have completed the module. Let's now review the material that we covered.